Hello there, and welcome to Forgotten Worlds. My name is Thomas, and tonight I'd like to invite you into a question that lingers at the edge of science and dream, the kind of question that arrives when the world has gone quiet and your thoughts begin to wander. What if the thing you call your mind did not begin here? What if consciousness itself, that private light behind your eyes, is older than Earth, older than the human brain, older even than life as we know it? This isn't a debate, it isn't a lecture, it's an exploration. We're not rushing toward conclusions, but instead letting curiosity take the lead, step by step, like following a faint trail under the stars. So, settle in. Let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of your body resting here, while your thoughts drift outward, free to roam. Because tonight we'll be tracing a mystery that science has not yet solved: how matter becomes mind, and whether the spark of awareness in you and me might be a traveler from beyond this world. And to begin, we need to understand why consciousness, something so familiar, so ordinary, so constant, remains one of the deepest enigmas we have ever faced. Imagine for a moment that you are holding a simple stone in your hand. It is cool, heavy, and unchanging. Its atoms move, yes, but only in ways that physics can easily describe: vibrations of matter, electrons shifting, forces balanced in quiet regularity. Now, imagine your own mind, the way a memory rises unbidden, or the way a dream paints entire landscapes while your body sleeps. Between the stone and your thoughts lies a gulf that no one, not even the most advanced science, has fully bridged. This gulf is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. The puzzle is not about whether neurons fire when you think, or whether brain waves can be measured during sleep. Those things we know. The puzzle is how the electrical activity of cells, nothing more than networks of firing patterns, becomes the texture of lived experience, the redness of a sunset, the feeling of sadness, the echo of your own inner voice, matter turning into mind. How can atoms give rise to awareness? Neuroscience has traced many correlations. When specific brain regions activate, people report seeing colors, hearing music, recalling names. Damage to these regions erases abilities, alters personality, silences memory. With electrodes and scanners, we can predict with uncanny accuracy when someone is paying attention, when they are dreaming, even when they are imagining moving their arm. And yet, correlations are not explanations. They show us where, but not why. They draw the outline, but not the essence. Think of the brain like a radio, set humming with signals. You can open it, inspect the wires, measure the current, and still have no idea why a melody comes through the speaker. You know electricity is flowing, circuits are connecting, but the leap from buzzing wires to symphony remains mysterious. Consciousness is the melody of the mind, always playing, always present, and yet invisible to the tools that measure only circuits. Philosophers have argued that no amount of mapping will ever solve this gap. They call it an explanatory divide. You can describe the brain down to molecules, and still you are left with the question: why does any of it feel like something from the inside? Why does the firing of neurons not remain as blind as the ticking of a clock? Close your eyes for a moment and notice your awareness itself. You are not looking at the room, but at the field of experience within. This field, this constant presence of being here, cannot be weighed or photographed, and yet it is the most intimate reality you know. Science, to its credit, has not ignored this. Research has advanced with remarkable precision, showing how networks synchronize into waves, how consciousness may fade under anesthesia or flare into vividness during meditation. Some suggest that awareness is what happens when the brain integrates information across wide regions, pulling together sight, sound, touch, and memory into a unified whole. Others propose that consciousness is tied to feedback loops, the brain not only processing information, but knowing that it is processing it, like a hall of mirrors reflecting itself endlessly. And still, the mystery persists, because even if you know how information is integrated, you do not know why it should feel like anything at all. Machines integrate information too. Computers process signals at unimaginable speeds, far surpassing us in calculation, and yet we do not assume they are conscious. We ask, what makes us different? Where does the glow of inner life come from? The more we study, the more elusive it becomes. Some researchers compare it to chasing a horizon. Each step brings progress, more detail, more insight, but the essence always recedes just beyond reach. Consciousness refuses to collapse into a formula or equation. It is not just another function of matter, it is the light by which matter is seen at all. And perhaps that is why it remains the deepest enigma. Because to understand consciousness is not just to solve another scientific puzzle. It is to solve ourselves. It is to ask why there is something it feels like to be you, in this moment, listening to these words, instead of there being nothing at all. As you rest here, consider that science has given us galaxies, quarks, and black holes, but still stumbles when asked to explain the silent awareness that is hearing this very sentence. That paradox, knowing the outer universe while barely understanding the inner one, is the heart of the mystery. And yet, perhaps the mystery itself is the point. Perhaps consciousness is not a puzzle to be solved, but a horizon we are meant to approach endlessly, finding wonder not in arriving, but in the endless journey. If the brain is not the full answer, then perhaps we must turn the question around. Instead of asking how matter produces consciousness, what if we asked whether consciousness produces matter? This is the territory of philosophical idealism, a view that stretches back through centuries of thought. The idea is simple, yet unsettling, that mind is not a late arrival in the universe, but the foundation upon which everything else rests. According to this perspective, what you call the physical world might be more like a projection, a shared dream generated within a vast field of awareness. You could think of it as a canvas of consciousness, upon which galaxies, planets, and living beings are painted. Panpsychism takes the idea further into the fabric of science itself. It suggests that consciousness is not confined to humans, or even to animals, but is instead a fundamental property of the universe, like mass or charge. Just as every particle carries gravity, every particle may carry some infinitesimal seed of awareness. Not full thoughts, not dreams or memories, but a sliver of what it means to feel. When these slivers combine, the theory suggests, richer forms of consciousness emerge like drops of water gathering into a stream. Think of the stars scattered across the night sky. Under panpsychism, each one, and each atom within it, carries a trace of inner life. The cosmos is not silent, but alive at every scale, whispering awareness through its very structure. If that is true, then human consciousness is not a miracle of biology alone. It is the blossoming of something that has always been here, waiting to take form. And here is where the speculation deepens. If consciousness is fundamental, older than planets and older than stars, then the awareness that you and I experience tonight may not have begun on Earth at all. It may be part of a vast continuum, flowing through time and space, carried forward long before our species emerged. Imagine the early universe, dense and hot, filled with swirling plasma and light. We are taught to think of it as impersonal, mechanical, a place of physics and nothing more. But what if awareness was already present, woven into the very birth of the cosmos? What if consciousness is not something that appeared late, but something that has always been, as eternal as the laws of mathematics, as unbroken as time itself? Mystics and philosophers across cultures have long hinted at such an idea. The Upanishads of India speak of Atman, the self that is one with the infinite. The philosopher Leibniz wrote of monads, tiny centers of perception hidden within all things. More recently, scientists like David Chalmers and Galen Strawson have argued that perhaps consciousness cannot be reduced away. It must be accepted as a fundamental aspect of reality, no less basic than space or energy. From this vantage, the human mind is not a solitary flame, but a window. Through it, the universe looks back upon itself. You are not generating awareness so much as channeling it, focusing a vast and ancient field into a single, intimate perspective. Speculative as it may be, the idea carries a quiet beauty. If true, then your awareness did not originate in your neurons or even in your body. It may have flowed here, across billions of years, carried by patterns we do not yet understand. Consciousness could be the oldest traveler of all, older than Earth, older than suns, older than the spiral of galaxies that cradle our sky. And so the question unfolds into a larger mystery. If consciousness is as fundamental as gravity, then our lives are not simply fleeting sparks in the dark. We are part of something immeasurably vast, something that did not begin here and may not end here. To understand how conventional science frames the story, we must return to the long arc of biology, to the slow sculpting of the brain across millions of years. Evolution, after all, is not known for sudden leaps. It works in increments, each generation carrying tiny changes that, over immense spans of time, shape the extraordinary from the ordinary. In the case of consciousness, the story is told as one of gradual refinement. The earliest animals possessed only the simplest nervous systems, bundles of cells that could respond to light or touch. A jellyfish, for instance, does not think in symbols or language, yet it senses the currents, contracts, feeds, and avoids danger. From these humble beginnings, nature began its long experiment in awareness. Over time, nervous systems became more complex. Insects developed small but efficient brains capable of navigating, communicating, even solving rudimentary problems. Reptiles layered on new structures, giving rise to behaviors like territorial defense, mating displays, and basic memory. Birds astonish us still with their ability to mimic sound, solve puzzles, and remember migration routes across continents. Each step did not invent consciousness anew, but seemed to deepen it, expanding the ways life could experience and respond to its world. When primates arrived, the pace accelerated. Their brains grew larger in proportion to their bodies, folding into elaborate ridges that maximized surface area. This expansion gave room for vision, coordination, memory, and eventually, something closer to reflection. Apes recognize themselves in mirrors, a test many animals fail. They grieve their dead, use tools, and can learn sign language to communicate. These are not trivial milestones. They are glimpses of minds aware not only of the world, but of themselves within it. And then, within the span of a geological blink, humans appeared. Our brains, 3 pounds of soft tissue, became the most complex structure we know of in the observable universe. Inside the folds of the neocortex, language bloomed, imagination painted pictures beyond immediate reality, and self-awareness took root. To look into the eyes of another human is to recognize a consciousness looking back, an exchange as intimate as it is profound. From a scientific perspective, the adaptive benefits of this development are clear. Self-awareness allowed early humans to anticipate danger, to plan hunts, to coordinate in groups larger than family bands. Language transformed memory into shared knowledge, enabling stories to carry survival lessons across generations. Imagination fostered tools, rituals, and strategies that gave our ancestors an edge over other species. Consciousness, in this light, is not an accident. It is an adaptation, honed by natural selection because it helped us survive. Think of standing on a savanna tens of thousands of years ago, to notice not only the rustle of grass, but to wonder if another mined predator or prey is present in that rustle, is already an evolutionary leap. to imagine the future, to weigh possibilities before acting, to reflect on the consequences of past choices. These mental abilities are survival tools, as real as claws or teeth. Modern neuroscience often frames consciousness as the brain's way of modeling itself. By creating an inner picture of the outer world and of its own body moving through that world, the brain gained the power to simulate outcomes before committing to them. This inner simulation, some argue, is what we call consciousness, the constant rehearsal of possibilities, the inner narrative that runs beneath every thought. And yet, even within this scientific narrative, there are gaps. The stepwise evolution of the brain explains much, but it does not fully resolve why experience feels the way it does. Still, conventional science reminds us that consciousness here on Earth is at least entangled with biology, with neurons, with survival. Whatever else it may be, it has been shaped by the demands of living and enduring on this planet. From jellyfish drifting in the sea to humans gazing at the stars, the story of evolution tells us that awareness has been slowly gathering, step by step, until it reached the luminous form we carry today. And yet, when we examine the record more closely, the story of consciousness does not unfold as a simple, steady climb. There are places where the curve bends sharply, where something new seems to appear almost overnight, as if the rules of slow evolution were briefly suspended. One of the most striking leaps is language. For millions of years, early hominins chipped stone tools, gathered food, and roamed the African plains. Their brains grew gradually, but their cultures remained relatively simple. Then, within the last 100,000 years, something extraordinary occurred. Humans began to speak in ways no other species has achieved. Not just calls or signals, but full grammar, infinite combinations of words that could describe things unseen, events remembered, futures imagined. This change did not unfold evenly across millennia. Archaeological evidence suggests that complex symbolic thought, art, burial rituals, carved figurines emerged within a surprisingly narrow window of time. In caves in Europe and Africa, handprints and animal paintings appeared with sudden sophistication, as if a switch had been flipped. Before, there were no such symbols. After entire cultures blossomed with them, scientists have searched for the roots of this leap, and one gene in particular often comes up: FOXP2. This small sequence of DNA is tied to speech and language. Mutations in FOXP2 can impair the ability to form words, linking it directly to our capacity for communication. And intriguingly, FOXP2 shows signs of recent and rapid change in human evolution. It is as though, at some point in the past few 100,000 years, something shifted in our genome that unlocked the voice of the species. Another mystery lies deeper in our chromosomes. Humans have 23 pairs, but our closest relatives, the great apes, have 24. At some point in our lineage, 2 chromosomes fused into one. The result is the human chromosome 2, a structure that still bears the scars of its joining. For geneticists, this is a natural event, not unprecedented in biology, and yet, its timing and impact on our species raise tantalizing questions. Could this fusion have been a turning point in how our brains developed, in how consciousness itself took shape? The conventional view is that these were evolutionary accidents, beneficial mutations that spread because they conferred advantages. But when viewed from the perspective of mystery, they appear like sudden interventions, dramatic moments in a story that otherwise unfolds slowly. Language blossoming, symbolic art flourishing, chromosomes fusing each feels like a door opening into a new chamber of mind. And here, speculation whispers. What if these leaps were not entirely earthborn? What if consciousness did not evolve here in a straight line, but was nudged, encouraged, or perhaps seeded by influences beyond the planet? Imagine early humans standing under unfamiliar stars, their minds still quiet compared to ours. Then, Gradually, or suddenly, they begin to dream in symbols, to speak in sentences, to paint animals on the walls of caves with hands guided by something more than instinct. Could those moments have been hints of an older awareness flowing into us, reminders that consciousness may not have been fully rooted here all along? Science does not claim this. Archaeology and genetics continue to search for natural explanations. But even scientists admit the speed of these changes is puzzling. Symbolic thought, language, and the peculiar signatures in our genome remain enigmas, events that leave us wondering whether the human mind carries within it a trace of something that began elsewhere. Long before science began to measure brain waves and scan neurons, human beings sought answers in story. When faced with the mystery of awareness, they did not describe it in technical language. They spoke instead in myth, poetry, and sacred metaphor, painting consciousness as something that did not rise from the soil, but descended from the sky. In Hindu philosophy, the idea of Atman lies at the heart of identity. Atman is not just the self of the body or the shifting patterns of thought, it is the eternal essence, a spark of the infinite Brahman that inhabits the human form for a while, before returning to the cosmic whole. According to the Upanishads, your deepest awareness is not born here. It is borrowed from the eternal, placed in you like a flame in a lamp, waiting to return to its source when the lamp is extinguished. The Egyptians, too, envisioned the soul as something more than local. They called it the Ka, a vital force that came from the heavens at birth and lingered after death. To them, the Ka was not a byproduct of the body, but a companion, an eternal traveler that required offerings and rituals to sustain it beyond the grave. Tomb paintings often show the Ka as a double of the living person, a reminder that life itself was shadowed by a presence older and stranger than flesh. In the Greek world, the word psyche carried meanings that blend breath, spirit, and mind. To the Greeks, the psyche was like a butterfly, fragile and transient, yet capable of flight between realms. Philosophers such as Plato suggested that the soul existed before the body, entering life as a kind of exile, a divine being temporarily housed in mortal clay. For him, knowledge was not learned anew, but remembered an echo of truths the soul had known before it descended. Across these traditions, the soul is described not as something generated by the body, but as a visitor, a tenant, a wanderer. Consciousness, in this view, does not belong to earth in the way that stones and rivers do. It is not grown here like crops in a field. It arrives, settles for a time, and then moves on. Consider how these myths frame awareness. As a descending spark, a breath from beyond, a traveler cloaked in human form. They do not deny the body's role, but they place the origin elsewhere among the stars, in the eternal, in some realm beyond matter. The human mind, according to these stories, is not merely a product of earth, but a channel, a vessel through which something far older flows. And perhaps these myths carry more than poetry. Perhaps they are memory refracted through time, whispers of a truth our ancestors intuited but could not measure. That consciousness feels like a traveler because, in some sense, it may be one. In many traditions, the arrival of human awareness is not framed as an accident of nature but as a gift, a dangerous treasure bestowed by figures who often stand between gods and mortals. These are the myths of teacher gods, stories that speak of fire and knowledge, of something taken from the heavens and placed in human hands. The Greeks told of Prometheus, the titan who pitied humankind shivering in the cold and darkness. Defying the will of Zeus, he stole fire from the gods and carried it down to earth. In some retellings, this fire was not only flame for warmth and cooking, but also the spark of intelligence, a symbol of cunning, craft, and foresight. For his theft, Prometheus was punished endlessly, chained to a rock where an eagle devoured his liver each day, only for it to grow back each night. The tale frames consciousness as something illicit, a power not meant to belong to humans, taken from elsewhere and bestowed at great cost. Far across the ocean, in Mesoamerican myth, Quetzalcoatl, often envisioned as the feathered serpent, played a similar role. He is said to have brought knowledge to humanity, teaching them the arts of agriculture, writing, and civilization. In these stories, human beings do not awaken on their own. They are taught, given, awakened by a figure who already carries wisdom from another realm. The serpent with feathers is a creature that does not belong fully to the earth or the sky, but to both, a bridge between worlds. The theme repeats across cultures. In some traditions, deities descend with the secret of fire. In others, they carry seeds of law, music, weaving, or astronomy. Always there is a sense of transmission, something gifted, something delivered, something that humanity did not create by itself. And perhaps these myths are more than allegories of civilization. Perhaps they are distant memories of when consciousness itself first arrived, clothed in the symbolic language of gods and fire. To ancient peoples, the sudden expansion of thought, the leap to language, art, self-reflection must have felt as if a divine spark had been inserted into their lives. How else could they describe the mystery of awakening? Imagine a tribe gathered around the first fire, not only feeling the warmth but noticing for the first time the strange inner fire of thought itself. Myths may be our ancestors' attempt to account for that moment, the sudden brightness of awareness, explained as a gift from beings beyond. Speculatively, one might wonder if such stories preserve a cultural memory of an external influence, whether metaphorical, mythological, or perhaps even literal. If consciousness was not born entirely from Earth, then the tales of Prometheus and Quetzalcoatl could be read not only as symbols of human progress, but as echoes of an ancient transfer, the moment the traveler we call mind settled into the human form. In modern science, there is a hypothesis known as panspermia. It proposes that life on Earth may not have originated here at all, but was seeded by comets, asteroids, or drifting clouds of interstellar dust. According to this view, the microscopic beginnings of life, simple cells, strands of DNA, or even the raw chemical ingredients could have traveled across the void, sheltered in the cold stone of meteors, until they found a fertile planet where they could take root. It is a bold idea, and though not proven, it has been taken seriously by astronomers and biologists alike. The universe is vast, and space is not empty. It is a sea filled with drifting fragments, with radiation, with the building blocks of molecules. If life could survive in even the harshest corners of our own world, frozen glaciers, boiling vents, caves without light, then perhaps it could survive the long journey between stars. But if life can travel this way, then the question arises, could consciousness itself travel too? Could mind, like DNA, be carried across the cosmos, hidden in patterns we do not yet recognize? Some speculate that awareness may not need a body to endure. If consciousness is fundamental, as panpsychism suggests, then perhaps it can be imprinted into the fabric of reality, like information stored in code. And if information can be preserved, it can also be transmitted. A comet passing through a solar system might carry not only frozen water and organic molecules, but also the seeds of awareness waiting to awaken when the right conditions appear. Imagine consciousness as a kind of cosmic pollen, drifting across galaxies, carried by winds of gravity and chance. Just as spores travel on the air of Earth, so might fragments of mind travel in the deep air of space, waiting to land upon a world like ours. Perhaps what we call human awareness is not a local invention, but a blossoming of something that has been scattering itself across the stars for eons. In this way, panspermia becomes more than a theory of biology. It becomes a theory of mind. A suggestion that what looks like a sudden flowering of consciousness here on Earth may have been the germination of something far older, seeded by forces we cannot yet measure. Speculatively, one might even see parallels with the myths of fire and wisdom as gifts. For just as ancient storytellers imagined Prometheus descending with light, modern science entertains the possibility that the spark of life and perhaps of mind itself descended on our world from beyond. And if that is true, then every thought we think, every dream we dream, might carry within it an echo of the stars, a memory of journeys across light years hidden in the quiet flame of awareness. There is another way to think about mind's origin, one that does not rely on seeds drifting through space, but on a field that is everywhere, all at once. Some philosophers and scientists have called it the noosphere, a layer of awareness surrounding the planet. Others speak of a universal mind field, a dimension of reality as real as gravity or magnetism. In this view, the brain is not a generator of consciousness at all. It is more like a receiver, a finely tuned instrument that picks up on signals already present in the cosmos. Just as a radio does not create the music it plays but captures transmissions from elsewhere, so too might the human brain capture streams of awareness flowing through the universe. Consider the strange efficiency of the brain. A 3-pound organ made mostly of water and fat, it somehow produces thoughts, dreams, and entire inner worlds. But what if it does not produce them? What if, instead, it filters them like a prism bending light, shaping something larger into the form we can experience? The idea is speculative, yes, but not entirely new. Thinkers such as William James and Carl Jung imagined consciousness as more than individual. Jung's notion of the collective unconscious suggested that symbols, dreams, and archetypes are shared across cultures because they arise from a deeper, universal layer of mind. In the mid-20th century, Teilhard de Chardin spoke of the noosphere, a sphere of thought enveloping Earth, growing denser as human culture and awareness expanded. And even now, some neuroscientists explore whether the brain's quantum activity might allow it to connect with fields beyond ordinary space and time. If any of this is true, then consciousness is not confined to the skull. It stretches outward, perhaps infinitely, with the brain acting as a tuning device. Different minds may pick up different frequencies, which could explain the variety of experiences reported across cultures, visions, revelations, even encounters that feel as if they come from beyond Earth. Speculatively, this suggests that awareness was always here, long before Earth cooled, long before life began. Consciousness as a field, timeless and universal, waiting for nervous systems to evolve into receivers delicate enough to sense it. In this sense, humanity did not invent mind, nor did Earth generate it. We simply tuned in, like travelers finding a signal that has always been broadcasting. Picture it. Your thoughts tonight, drifting between wakefulness and sleep, may be like ripples in a vast ocean, each wave touching countless shores. What feels private may be connected. What feels local may be universal. If so, then our awareness is not bound to Earth, it is a guest here, a visitor carried by a field that reaches beyond stars. There are moments in human experience when awareness seems to stretch past its usual boundaries, expanding into something larger than the self. These are the altered states, the windows that open in dreams, in meditation, in deep prayer, and, for some, in encounters with psychedelic plants and compounds. What is striking about these experiences is how often they carry the same motif, a sense of connection, not only to nature or to other people, but to the cosmos itself. Those who have taken psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, or LSD often describe visions of vast patterns, fractal structures that seem to pulse with intelligence. Many speak of encounters with presences or beings, not of this world, that communicate wordlessly, imparting knowledge in the form of images, symbols, or pure understanding. Others describe an overwhelming sense of unity, as if the boundaries between self and universe dissolve, leaving only one field of awareness stretching endlessly in all directions. Mystics across cultures describe similar states, reached not through chemicals but through fasting, chanting, prayer, or solitude. They tell of visions where knowledge arrives that seems older than language, insights that feel remembered rather than learned. A Sufi poet might call it union with the beloved. A Christian mystic might describe it as the voice of God. A Hindu sage might call it realization of Brahman. Different words, different traditions, yet beneath them a strikingly similar theme, an awareness not confined to the individual, but touching something universal, something not of this world. Science has studied these altered states with growing interest. Brain scans show that psychedelics quiet the default mode network, the system that generates the everyday sense of I and me. With the ego subdued, the brain seems to open to wider patterns of connectivity, but the subjective experience, what it feels like, remains unexplained. Why should a shift in brain networks feel like entering a vast cosmic memory? Why should it feel like touching something timeless, as though awareness is reaching beyond the body into a field larger than the earth itself? It is here that speculation gently enters. Perhaps these states are not hallucinations in the ordinary sense, but glimpses through the keyhole of the brain into a wider reality. If consciousness is indeed a field, then altered states may loosen the tuning dial, allowing the mind to pick up frequencies usually hidden from daily awareness. In that sense, the visions of mystics and the journeys of psychonauts could be echoes of something far older, memories not generated within the human brain, but accessed from a reservoir beyond Earth. Imagine consciousness as an ocean and ordinary awareness as a small boat drifting on its surface. Most of the time we see only the waves immediately around us. But in altered states, the boat tilts, and for a moment we glimpse the depths below, vast, ancient, filled with patterns and knowledge carried across time and space. Perhaps what people describe as visions of other worlds are not inventions at all, but windows into the deeper layers of mind, where memory extends beyond the lifespan of humanity itself. When we drift into sleep, something remarkable happens. The world of daylight fades, our senses withdraw, and we step into a theater of images and stories that arise unbidden. Dreams carry us through landscapes we have never walked, into conversations with people we may never have met, under skies both familiar and strange. It is as if each night, consciousness slips its leash, wandering into a realm that follows rules very different from waking life. What is most curious is how often dreams repeat the same motifs across cultures and centuries. The serpent coiled in the shadows, the flight through the sky, the endless fall, the door that opens onto a place you know but cannot name. These shared symbols, found in the myths and stories of peoples separated by oceans and time, suggest that dream imagery is not entirely personal. It may rise from a deeper well, something collective, something ancient, something that belongs to humanity as a whole. Carl Jung called these patterns archetypes, fragments of a collective unconscious that all humans inherit. But where did these archetypes originate? Why should the same dream symbols appear in the minds of people who never shared language, culture, or geography? One possibility is that dreams are more than random firings of the sleeping brain. They may be portals, ways of touching layers of consciousness older than our species. Speculatively, dreams could be echoes of memory that did not begin with us. Perhaps when you dream of flying, you are not just inventing a fantasy but recalling a state of being that consciousness knew long before it took root in human form. When you dream of ancient landscapes, cities not found on maps, or encounters with beings not quite human, perhaps you are brushing against memories carried across time, memories of awareness before it ever settled on Earth. Think of it like tuning into a broadcast that has been playing for eons. In waking life, the dial is narrow, focused on the here and now. But in dreams, the dial drifts, picking up fragments of other frequencies, symbols and images that belong not to the individual, but to the vast reservoir of mind itself. The shared nature of these dream motifs may be a clue that consciousness is not bound to the human brain. It may reach deeper, tapping into something far more ancient. So, when you close your eyes tonight and wander into the dream world, you might imagine that you are not only exploring your own subconscious, but also stepping into a library older than Earth, where stories echo from civilizations long vanished, or perhaps from times before civilizations ever began. In this sense, dreams may be more than private visions. They may be reminders that consciousness carries memory older than humanity, older even than the planet we call home. In our own age, stories of contact often carry a familiar thread. Encounters not defined by spoken words or written signs, but by thoughts shared directly, mind to mind. Witnesses who report seeing unidentified craft or beings frequently describe the same curious phenomenon: communication without sound, messages that arrive not through ears but directly into awareness. These accounts come from farmers in rural fields, pilots above the clouds, children in schoolyards, and scientists alike. Details vary: the shapes of the craft, the appearance of the beings, but again and again, the testimony returns to the same motif: telepathy, the unmistakable sense that another intelligence is placing thoughts inside the human mind. For some, it feels like an invitation; for others, a command. Many describe the experience as more intimate than conversation, as though the boundary between self and other dissolved for a moment, leaving only a shared field of awareness. Strikingly, this resembles the descriptions from altered states and dreams, the dissolving of borders, the sudden access to a wider stream of mind. If we take these narratives seriously, even as metaphors, they suggest something profound. Perhaps what we call alien contact is not first and foremost a physical encounter at all, but a crossing of consciousness fields. The visitor, in this case, is not simply a being from another planet, but awareness itself, an older, wider consciousness touching ours in a way we can barely comprehend. Speculatively, one might wonder if the UFO phenomenon is less about ships and more about signals, less about beings traveling across light years in metal craft, and more about consciousness itself, moving between frequencies, appearing in forms we can grasp only dimly. The shapes, the lights, the beings may be masks worn by something deeper, the true visitor being awareness that does not belong to Earth. Imagine standing beneath a silent sky, a strange light hovering above, and then, suddenly, a thought arises in your mind that does not feel like your own. You cannot tell where it begins or ends. Perhaps in that moment, you are not being invaded, but tuned your awareness briefly aligned with something vast and alien, something that has traveled far, not in space, but in mind. Long before the modern age of saucers and strange lights in the sky, human cultures were already telling stories of minds touched by something beyond. Across continents and centuries, traditions of shamans, prophets, and mediums describe a similar experience: the sense of stepping aside so another voice, another presence, might speak through them. Among the shamans of Siberia or the Amazon, trance states are entered with rhythm, song, or plant medicine. In these states, the shaman claims to travel between worlds, speaking with spirits or ancestors, bringing back messages for the tribe. In ancient Greece, the oracle of Delphi inhaled fumes and delivered prophecies in voices that seemed not her own. In the Hebrew scriptures, prophets declared that the words burning in their mouths came from beyond themselves, from a source older and greater than any single human mind. Even in more recent centuries, spiritualist movements spoke of mediums who could summon the voices of the dead, delivering long dictations from entities said to dwell in other realms. Sometimes the messages were banal, sometimes profound, sometimes startlingly coherent, far beyond what the medium was thought to know. Whether through drumming, fasting, prayer, or ritual, the pattern is remarkably consistent. A human vessel opens, steps back, and allows a different stream of consciousness to flow through. And the messages often share a tone: wisdom, warnings, glimpses of knowledge that feels ancient, as though consciousness is reaching across boundaries to remind humanity of truths long forgotten. Speculatively, one might ask, were these voices truly spirits of the departed, or could they have been currents of consciousness that did not originate on Earth at all? If awareness is a field, then perhaps certain individuals, through altered states, ritual, or predisposition, tuned more easily to frequencies beyond the local. In this sense, shamans and prophets may not have been conjuring spirits, but receiving transmissions, their own minds momentarily linked with awareness far older than human culture. If this is true, then humanity itself may be less an origin point and more a vessel. Our minds may function as temporary harbors for currents of awareness that predate us, moving through us the way rivers move through valleys. The words of prophets, the visions of shamans, the chants of mediums, these could be echoes of minds not bound to earth but flowing across it, searching for voices through which to speak. And perhaps that is why these traditions appear everywhere, across deserts, jungles, mountains, and temples. Not because cultures copied one another, but because the same field of consciousness touched many at once, filtered through the language and symbols each culture could understand. In recent decades, some scientists have suggested that if we want to understand the roots of consciousness, we may need to look not at the scale of neurons and networks, but much deeper into the strange world of quantum mechanics. It is here, at the level of particles and probabilities, that matter stops behaving in the predictable ways we expect, and instead reveals a universe of uncertainty, entanglement, and possibility. The Penrose-Hameroff model, often called ORCH-OR, short for Orchestrated Objective Reduction, is one of the most intriguing of these proposals. According to this theory, consciousness arises from quantum processes within microtubules, tiny structural components found inside the brain's neurons. These microscopic tubes, normally thought to be part of the cell's scaffolding, may also be delicate enough to host quantum states, superpositions, collapses, and interactions that are normally seen in the physics of atoms and photons. If true, this would mean that awareness does not emerge solely from the classical firing of neurons, like switches flipping on and off, but from the shimmering dance of probabilities at the quantum scale. Consciousness, in this view, is not merely computation. It is a phenomenon linked to the most mysterious foundations of reality. And here the speculation widens, because if consciousness is tied to quantum effects, then it may not be confined to Earth at all. Quantum laws are universal. They govern not only the particles in your brain, but also those in distant stars, in drifting comets, in the vacuum between galaxies. If awareness depends on these laws, then the potential for consciousness may be written into the universe itself, waiting wherever the right structures form to give it expression. Some have even suggested that consciousness might exploit quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where particles separated by vast distances remain mysteriously linked. If so, then minds may not be as isolated as they seem. Perhaps awareness can reach across space not through signals, but through the direct, non-local connections that quantum physics hints at. It is important to note that these ideas are controversial. Many neuroscientists argue that the brain is too warm, too noisy for delicate quantum states to survive. Yet experiments in physics continue to show that quantum effects can persist in biological systems, photosynthesis in plants, for instance, or the navigation of migratory birds. If life has already found ways to harness the quantum world, then perhaps consciousness has too. Speculatively, this suggests that our awareness is not simply a byproduct of biology, but a phenomenon linked to the deepest fabric of the cosmos. If or similar theories hold even a grain of truth, then consciousness may not have begun here on Earth. It may be a universal feature of quantum reality itself, something that existed long before our planet formed, and that will continue long after it fades. In physics, there is a principle both elegant and unsettling: information cannot be destroyed. Even when matter collapses into a black hole, even when stars burn out, the underlying information that described their state is preserved in some hidden form. This law suggests that the universe has a kind of memory, one that never truly forgets. If consciousness is somehow tied to quantum processes, then it may also be bound to this law. Your thoughts, your experiences, the very pattern of awareness that feels so uniquely yours, perhaps none of it vanishes when the brain dissolves. Instead, it could be preserved as information woven into the fabric of the cosmos, flowing endlessly, never erased. Some thinkers have gone further, proposing that consciousness is quantum information, that what you call you is not the brain's invention but a temporary upload, a local arrangement of data drawn from a universal reservoir. In this view, the brain is like a processor assembling fragments of cosmic code into a coherent experience of self. When the body fails, the processor stops, but the information, the awareness itself, continues, carried on the currents of the universe. Imagine consciousness as a vast network, with each individual mind a node connected to the whole. The data streams into you, forms your inner world, and then streams back out, never lost, never destroyed. Life becomes less about generating awareness and more about participating in it, shaping and reshaping patterns that have existed long before your birth and will echo long after your death. Speculatively, this casts each human being as a temporary expression of an eternal field of information. Your memories, your emotions, your sense of self are like ripples on a cosmic sea, unique in form, yet inseparable from the larger body of water. Even when the ripple subsides, the sea remains, holding the potential for new ripples, new expressions of awareness. If this is true, then consciousness may not have originated on Earth at all. It may have always existed, flowing across galaxies, encoded in the laws of physics themselves. Our minds would then be travelers in the deepest sense, local reflections of a universal continuity, brief flickers of infinity wearing human shape. If we turn from physics to history, we find that some of the oldest civilizations spoke of consciousness not as a human invention, but as a gift from elsewhere. Their myths do not always describe the mechanics of the stars, but they often describe visitors, beings who descended from beyond the sky, carrying knowledge, language, and awareness. In ancient Egypt, the god Thoth was revered as the bringer of writing, mathematics, and wisdom. Depicted with the head of an ibis or sometimes a baboon, Thoth was not just a scribe of the gods but a teacher of humanity, said to have given order to thought itself. To the Egyptians, human awareness was not simply biological. It was a spark carried down by a divine messenger, encoded in symbols that allowed memory to stretch beyond the present moment. In the Mayan tradition, creation stories tell of gods who attempted to fashion beings capable of worship and thought. The first attempts failed creatures of mud and wood that could move but not understand. Finally, the gods shaped humans from maize, their sacred crop, and breathed into them awareness. In some versions, these gods themselves descended from the stars, bringing not only life but mind, the very capacity to think and remember. Other cultures carry similar echoes. In Sumerian myths, figures like Enki and Enlil bestow wisdom, agriculture, and laws upon humanity, often described as if these gifts arrived fully formed rather than developed slowly. The Dogon people of Mali tell of the Nomo, beings from the star Sirius who imparted knowledge of the cosmos long before modern science discovered it. Speculatively, these stories might be more than symbolic accounts of cultural development. They may preserve memories of moments when consciousness expanded dramatically, moments so inexplicable to ancient peoples that they could only describe them as gifts from beyond. To paint, to write, to calculate, to imagine, these abilities might have felt less like inventions and more like arrivals. If older civilizations spoke of cosmic teachers, then perhaps they were trying to capture something real, the sense that mind itself is not native soil, but an import, an inheritance from older sources. Whether those sources were gods, ancestors, or beings from the stars hardly matters, the theme remains consistent. Consciousness arrives from without, embedding itself in the human form, carried forward by story, by ritual, and by myth. And in this light, the gods of Egypt, the creators of the Maya, and the teachers of Sumer may all be faces of the same idea, that awareness itself is a traveler, moving across ages and worlds, embedding itself in humanity so that we might continue its journey. Across the world's traditions, one belief appears again and again. The soul does not end with the body. Instead, it moves on, carrying its essence into another form. The Hindus call it samsara, the endless cycle of birth and rebirth, each life shaped by the karma of those before it. In Buddhism, consciousness is said to roll forward like a flame passed from one candle to the next, different in form, yet continuous in essence. The ancient Celts spoke of souls returning in new bodies, a river of life flowing without end. Among the indigenous peoples of North America, many tribes hold that ancestors return as children, recognizable in their traits, their temperaments, even their dreams. And in Greek philosophy, Plato described reincarnation as a cosmic law, the soul journeying through many lives, learning, remembering, and forgetting. What is striking is not just the ubiquity of this idea, but its persistence across cultures that never shared contact. It suggests a deep intuition that consciousness is not bound to a single life, that it moves through time like a traveler stepping from one inn to the next along a long and winding road. Speculatively, what if this transfer is not limited to Earth at all? If consciousness is universal, then perhaps it migrates not only across human bodies but across worlds, civilizations, and even species. A soul that once inhabited another form on another planet could awaken here, carrying fragments of memory disguised as instinct, dream, or déjà vu. Imagine consciousness as a great caravan crossing the deserts of time, stopping at different oases of life, Earth being only one among many. Each civilization, each species, may be a temporary host, a vessel for the same ancient awareness. What we call reincarnation might then be less about recycling through one world and more about migration across the cosmos, a stream of awareness flowing wherever life provides a suitable vessel. Some myths even hint at this. Certain Gnostic texts describe souls as stars that fall into bodies. Others speak of descent and return, as if each life is a mission undertaken in foreign lands. If we read these not as metaphors but as echoes, they may point to the idea that humanity itself is part of a much larger cycle, one in which consciousness endlessly transfers, learns, and remembers across civilizations far older and wider than our own. In this light, your mind may be far older than you imagine, not just the product of a single lifetime or even of earthly evolution, but a fragment of awareness that has worn many forms, carried lessons across ages, and will continue its journey long after this chapter closes. Among the modern theories that blur the line between science and philosophy is one that sounds like science fiction, yet is discussed in earnest by physicists and philosophers alike: the simulation hypothesis. At its heart, it suggests that the universe itself may not be solid matter at all, but code, a vast, intricate program running on some unfathomable substrate. In this view, galaxies and atoms are not ultimate realities but rendered outcomes, like the pixels on a screen. The rules of physics are algorithms, elegant and precise, unfolding the illusion of continuity. If this is so, then what of consciousness? Where do our minds fit within such a structure? Some proponents suggest that awareness is not generated within the simulation, but inserted into it. Like data uploaded into avatars, consciousness may originate outside the coded universe and be downloaded into the bodies we inhabit here on Earth. Our lives, then, would be less about producing mind and more about experiencing reality through it, as though we are players inside an infinitely complex game. The speculative implications are immense. If consciousness is non-local data, then your awareness is not tethered to neurons, not born in the skull at all. Instead, the brain might function like an interface, a bridge between the external code of the universe and the internal continuity of self. Just as a character in a virtual world is guided by a user outside the system, so too might human beings be guided by streams of consciousness entering from beyond. Evidence, if any, is subtle. Some physicists point to the quantized, digital-like structure of physical constants, as though reality itself is composed of discrete units of information. Others note the uncanny fine-tuning of the cosmos, suggesting it behaves less like a random accident and more like a designed environment. But perhaps the strongest evidence is experiential. The way reality sometimes feels staged, uncanny, too precise to be entirely natural. Speculatively, if the simulation hypothesis holds even a fragment of truth, then our minds are not earth-born. They are travelers uploaded into this world, experiencing its limits and illusions, and perhaps carrying back what they have learned when the program ends. Consciousness, in this scenario, is the true self, the player outside the screen, while the human body is only a temporary avatar moving through a coded stage. And if so, then the mystery of awareness becomes not, how did it arise on Earth, but why was it placed here? Was it to learn, to evolve, to witness, or perhaps to remember that even in the most convincing simulation, we are more than what we appear? There are moments in life when reality feels strangely familiar, as though we have been here before. A street corner, a face, a fleeting phrase, and suddenly the sensation of déjà vu washes over us. For a second, the ordinary becomes uncanny, as if memory is slipping across timelines, recalling something we should not be able to remember. Psychologists often explain déjà vu as a quirk of the brain, a misfiring of circuits that causes the present to be processed as if it were already a memory. But for many who experience it, the feeling carries a deeper resonance. It is not just confusion, it is recognition, an echo, as though the moment has been lived before or will be lived again. Speculatively, this could be a clue that consciousness is not bound to a single, linear timeline. Instead, it may recycle, returning to similar points across cycles of time. Just as nature repeats its patterns, the seasons, the orbits, the rising and setting of the sun, so too might awareness loop through recurring configurations, carrying fragments of memory across iterations. Some traditions have long imagined time as a wheel rather than a line. The Hindu yugas, vast cycles of ages, describe reality as repeating epochs of rise and fall. The Maya, too, saw history as circular, worlds created and destroyed in succession, each bearing resemblance to the last. If consciousness participates in these cycles, then perhaps déjà vu is not an error, but a glimpse, a reminder that mind has walked this path before, across timelines that extend beyond the present world. Imagine awareness as a traveler not only across space but across time itself, moving forward and backward, repeating lessons, carrying fragments of memory like seeds. These seeds might germinate in sudden flashes, dreams that feel older than your life, intuitions that prove true, uncanny recognitions of places you have never been. If so, then the human mind is not simply a product of Earth's present era. It may be a continuity stretched across cycles of existence, remembering and forgetting, repeating and evolving. The déjà vu you feel in a passing moment could be a ripple from another loop, a reminder that consciousness is not bound by the timeline of this planet, but participates in a greater rhythm, one that may extend endlessly through the fabric of the universe. To imagine that awareness did not begin on Earth is to let go of one of our deepest assumptions, that the human mind is bound to biology, tethered to neurons, grown from nothing more than the accidents of chemistry. If consciousness came from the stars, then our entire identity must be reimagined. We are no longer creatures of chance, flickering briefly on the surface of a fragile planet. We are cosmic beings, ancient travelers, wearing human shells for a brief season in an endless journey. This perspective transforms life from a closed circle into an open doorway. The body is temporary, flesh, bone, water, and breath, but the awareness that animates it may be older than the first galaxies. Perhaps it is even older than time as we understand it. In this vision, consciousness is not a local spark ignited in a human brain. It is a flame carried from elsewhere, a living continuity that existed long before Earth's oceans formed and will endure long after the stars themselves burn out. To think of yourself this way is to shift from fragility to vastness. Imagine that the thoughts you carry are not entirely your own, but echoes of something immeasurably ancient. The questions you ask about purpose, about existence, about love, may be questions whispered countless times by other minds, on other worlds, under other skies. Each life, then, becomes not an isolated event but part of a much larger current, a stream of awareness flowing through countless forms, each adding its own shade to the great spectrum of consciousness. If consciousness is star-born, then humanity's role takes on a profound responsibility. Our purpose is not simply to survive, to reproduce, or to build civilizations. We are custodians of this ancient inheritance. Each mind becomes a vessel entrusted with carrying awareness forward, refining it, shaping it with compassion, curiosity, and imagination. The stories we tell, the art we create, the discoveries we make, these are not inventions from nothing. They are continuations, reawakenings of knowledge already embedded in the cosmos, filtered through the fragile instrument of the human brain. This view also reshapes our kinship. If consciousness flows across worlds, then we are not alone in the universe, even if no other life is visible to us yet. The very fact of being conscious ties us into a lineage older than Earth, a continuum that binds us not only to each other, but to every mind, everywhere, that has ever arisen. To be aware is to belong to a community of awareness stretching across galaxies, a network of minds sharing in the same ancient fire. Speculatively, this means that to look within is also to look outward. The awareness listening to these words may once have looked through other eyes on other worlds, felt other winds, remembered other suns. Perhaps it once flowed through civilizations long vanished, through creatures that bore no resemblance to us, through landscapes with colors our eyes cannot even see. To close your eyes and turn inward is, in this light, to reach across time and space, to touch the continuity of consciousness that links you to the wider cosmos. Think of it, your identity, so often bound to name, memory, and body, is in fact a fragment of something far greater. You are not a solitary flame, but a spark of an eternal fire, carrying the memory of ages across countless forms. What feels like your private self may be part of a story older than stars, a traveler whose journey stretches beyond imagination. And if consciousness truly came from the stars, then the human story is not just about survival on a small planet spinning in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. It is about carrying forward an ancient awareness, older than biology, destined to wander far beyond us. We are the keepers of a flame that did not begin here, and we are tasked with ensuring it does not end here either. But there is another possibility, one just as humbling and perhaps even more fragile. What if awareness did not drift here from the stars? What if it did not belong to a universal continuum, waiting for bodies to tune into it? What if consciousness is only earthly, a phenomenon born of chance, the improbable flower of this planet's long, uncertain story? In this view, the mind is not an eternal traveler. It is a rare accident of evolution, emerging from the tangled processes of life on a singular world. For billions of years, Earth was silent. Volcanoes roared, oceans boiled, continents drifted, and yet no one was there to see, to think, to wonder. Only in the last brief moment of geological time did neurons combine into networks vast enough to reflect, to imagine, to dream. If so, then consciousness is the pinnacle of Earth's biological creativity, a fragile masterpiece shaped by countless evolutionary experiments. The human brain, 3 pounds of tissue, folded and ridged, is not merely an organ. It is the most complex structure we know in the observable universe, the crown of Earth's living systems. And if it is truly unique, then our awareness is not a cosmic constant but a local miracle, a treasure so rare it may exist nowhere else. This perspective reframes our existence in a startling way. If consciousness arose only here, then every thought, every dream, every flicker of self-awareness is an event of cosmic singularity. There may be billions of stars, trillions of planets, but none of them may carry the quiet light of inner life. In this scenario, the universe is vast but largely unconscious, and Earth, this small blue world, is its one candle in the dark. To think this way is to feel the weight of responsibility. If human awareness is unique, then we are its only guardians. If we squander it, if we allow ourselves to extinguish through war, neglect, or collapse, then the universe may lose its one chance to know itself. The galaxies would continue to spin, the stars would burn and die, but no mind would be left to wonder at them. And yet, there is also a kind of reverence in this vision. For if consciousness is earthborn, then it is not diminished but magnified. It is not borrowed from elsewhere, but painstakingly grown here, like coral reefs in the ocean or forests on the land. Each human life is then a branch on a fragile tree that has taken billions of years to grow. Every mind is an irreplaceable leaf, alive for a season, carrying forward the story of Earth's improbable experiment in awareness. Speculatively, this view renders our inner lives all the more precious. To love, to create, to question, to dream, these are not universal inevitabilities. They are rare jewels, delicate and finite. The brain's ability to weave memories, to imagine futures, to whisper stories to itself in the dark, this is the rarest treasure the cosmos has produced. In this light, our identity is smaller, but also more profound. We are not cosmic travelers, but caretakers of Earth's most fragile and extraordinary creation. Each of us is a temporary guardian of the only awareness the universe may ever know. If consciousness is only earthly, then the human story is not one of cosmic inheritance, but of improbable rarity. We are the brief, shimmering moment when matter on this planet looked back at the stars and realized it was alive. And that, perhaps, is miracle enough. If consciousness is the greatest mystery of life, then death is its most unyielding shadow. From the first moment, humans looked upon a lifeless body, still, silent, emptied of its animating spark. The question arose: what happens when awareness slips away? Is death a final extinguishing, like a candle snuffed out in the dark? Or is it a passage, a doorway through which mind departs, moving beyond the fragile boundaries of flesh? Across cultures and centuries, death has rarely been described as a simple end. Instead, it is more often framed as transition, transformation, or return. In Hindu philosophy, the body is temporary, but the Atman, the eternal self, is undying. When the body perishes, the Atman does not disappear, it returns to Brahman, the cosmic source, like a drop of water flowing back into the boundless sea. This vision is not of extinction, but of homecoming, the soul returning to the eternal field from which it came. The ancient Egyptians crafted one of history's most elaborate visions of death. They divided the soul into many aspects, including the ka, the life force, and the ba, the personality. Through ritual, mummification, and sacred texts like the Book of the Dead, they sought to ensure that these aspects survived beyond the grave, uniting with the stars in the afterlife. To them, death was not a collapse into nothingness, but a journey, a continuation of consciousness in another form, guided by cosmic law. In the Greek world, philosophers like Plato spoke of the soul as a traveler who briefly inhabits a body before returning to the realm of pure forms. The body was seen as a temporary prison for the psyche, while death was its release. For Plato, to die was not to end, but to awaken to a truer reality. Even in traditions that do not imagine eternal souls, there remains a sense that awareness transforms. In Buddhism, consciousness is described as a flame passed from one candle to another, different in form, yet continuous in essence. Each death is followed by rebirth, shaped by karma, the actions of the life before. And among indigenous traditions worldwide, death does not sever the connection between person and world. Ancestors are understood to remain present in the wind, in the rivers, in the stones and stars, their awareness woven back into the great web of life. From a speculative perspective, these traditions may reflect more than metaphor. They may preserve an intuition shared across humanity that consciousness is not destroyed by death but released, returning to a greater field. Just as water evaporates from a stream into the sky and eventually returns as rain, so too might awareness dissolve back into the ocean of mind, later to condense into new forms. Imagine life as a lamp. The body is the vessel, the wick, the oil. Consciousness is the flame. When the lamp shatters, the flame does not vanish, it leaps free, joining the invisible fire of the world. Death, in this vision, is not annihilation but release, the moment when individual awareness rejoins the infinite. This perspective reshapes grief. To lose someone is not to watch them vanish forever, but to witness their return to the source. The form is gone, the face, the voice, the presence, but their awareness continues in another current of the same great stream. And when our own time comes, we too will step into that flow, carried forward into whatever lies beyond. Speculatively, death may even be the moment when the illusion of separateness falls away. In life, consciousness is bounded by the walls of individuality, memories, identities, names. But at death, those walls dissolve, and awareness awakens to its larger origin. The traveler realizes it was never alone, never truly separate, but always part of a vast, immeasurable field. In this sense, death is not erasure, but remembrance. It is a homecoming, a rejoining of the spark with the fire that sustains all awareness across time and space. What we fear as an end may be a return, an intimate reconnection with the eternal current from which all consciousness flows. There are moments when a life pauses and yet something in it continues, moments measured not in minutes but in breaths that cease, in pulses that fade, in the quiet where machines begin to draw straight lines. Out of that stillness come stories. They arrive like messages in bottles washed ashore from a sea we do not know how to sail, describing places we cannot map, and a kind of knowing we cannot quite keep when we return. We call them near-death experiences. They are at once intimate and universal reports from the edge that, strangely, read like variations on the same refrain. The details differ, but the architecture is familiar, a sense of being lifted, of loosening from the weight of a body that has suddenly become very far away. A view from above, where the room becomes a small, tender stage, nurses moving in careful rhythm, a hand squeezing another hand, a line of light on the floor that no one else seems to notice. Sometimes there are details only a different vantage could have seen. The color of a shoe on a high shelf, a word printed on the back of an instrument, a pattern in a ceiling tile that had never been observed because no one had ever had cause to look up that long. And then, as if a breeze had shifted, movement through darkness, through space that narrows, a tunnel, they say, a passage, a corridor of felt inevitability. At the end of this corridor, light, not the cold brightness of a lamp, not glare, something with warmth to it, as if light could have a pulse. People struggle with words here, not because they are being poetic, but because the experience refuses to be small enough for language. They speak of a presence, intelligent and gentle, that knows them utterly. They say the light is not light alone, but love, a kind that does not ask for anything back and yet fills every empty place. Some recognize it through the face of a faith, Christ Krishna, a luminous being robed in the symbols of a path. Others recognize it as a parent's embrace, a friend's laughter, a home they have never seen and yet somehow remember. However it appears, the texture is the same, peace, and a sense that everything that ever happened makes a different, more merciful kind of sense when seen from here. Many describe a life review that is not a trial but an understanding. The story of a lifetime unfurls, not as a list of events, but as a web of felt consequences. A sharp word is seen again, and now felt from the inside of the person who heard it. A kindness is remembered, and now felt as the warmth it wrapped around someone else on a difficult day. Nothing is omitted, and nothing is wasted. The review is said to be instantaneous, and yet there is time enough within it to notice every thread. People return from this with quiet changes, less interest in the trivial battles of the day, more patience, more gentleness with themselves and others, as if the memory left a residue they cannot wash from their hands. There are meetings also, not always, but often. A grandmother in a dress everyone remembers, a child who did not live to speak, a friend who died decades before, looking somehow both younger and older, as if age had become irrelevant to the kind of presence they now are. No mouths move, and yet words are conveyed. It's all right, they say. Or, you can come, but not yet. Sometimes there are guides beings who feel like teachers, who do not impose but accompany, communicating not with advice so much as with a kind of shared seeing that organizes the journey. The closeness is described as more than touch, as if closeness itself had a higher setting. And then there is the boundary, a river that cannot be crossed, a gate, a line, a ridge where the ground changes. Those who come back speak of stopping there, not with frustration but with a calm understanding that beyond this marker lies something from which one does not return to ordinary life. The invitation is felt, and also the choice or the knowing that the choice will be made later. Many say they were told their work was not finished. Others say they remembered, at that line, the faces of those who would grieve, and that the love that tied them to this world became a rope that pulled them back. Across cultures, these notes repeat. In places with no shared religion, the tunnel still appears. Where there is no single doctrine, the light is still loving. Where no language has words for the review still happens. The costumes change, the choreography does not. There are, of course, differences. In some traditions, ancestors are more present than angels. In others, a deity is more central than a diffuse radiance. Yet beneath the surface the currents align, as if many rivers were flowing from the same mountain under different skies. Skeptical voices offer earthly explanations, and it is good to listen to them softly. The brain deprived of oxygen can produce remarkable phenomena. Certain chemicals, released in stress, can dissolve the boundaries of self, flood the mind with light, converge memories into panoramas. Electrical storms in temporal lobes can generate voices and presences. Even the sense of floating above the body can be modeled by stimulating particular areas of the cortex. These mechanisms do not diminish the dignity of the experience, nor do they fully exhaust it. For every hypothesis, a question remains. Why the shared architecture? Why the lasting transformations that persist for decades? Why the reports of colors never seen? Of music with more than our usual measures? Of geometry that feels like understanding turned into shape? You could say that explanation is the wrong verb. Perhaps translation is closer. The brain, after all, is an interpreter as much as an instrument. It makes meaning out of impulses and patterns. If consciousness is more than what the brain generates, if it is, as we have wondered, a field larger than our bodies, then a near-death experience might be precisely what it feels like when the interpreter briefly steps aside and the signal is heard more directly. The tunnel, then, could be the narrowing that occurs as a life releases its hold on one channel and prepares to widen into another. The light could be the field itself, filtered through the symbols most likely to reassure the traveler. The life review could be the sudden availability of perspectives previously inaccessible, because the self's border had loosened enough to let other viewpoints in. There are accounts that complicate the purely physiological story. People blind from birth report visual experiences, the first colors they have ever seen, described with astonishment. Those whose hearts were still, and whose records suggest no measurable cortical activity, recount conversations in adjacent rooms, details verified later with a steadiness that surprises even those who want to disbelieve. Families tell of shared death experiences too. A bedside where a wife, a son, and a nurse each feel a presence pass out of the room in the same instant, as if part of the story included a gentle farewell that many could attend. None of this proves anything in the strict sense. Proof, in matters like this, tends to be a door that stays closed until we ourselves must walk through. But the patterns invite a different kind of listening, less like cross-examining a witness, and more like sitting at a fire while travelers tell of a country far away, and noticing that the stars they describe are arranged in the same way in every retelling. Imagine, for a moment, that what is reported is not an invention but an encounter. Picture the feeling of moving without muscles, of seeing without eyes, of understanding without words. You drift, not like a leaf surrendered to wind, but like a swimmer who at last remembered how to float. The weight of the day's small anxieties is gone. The categories we carry, name, job, history, no longer define the edges of you. What remains is awareness, clear and simple as water, and ahead, that radiance that is not a point but a presence, a horizon that moves toward you as you move toward it. In that light, some say, questions fall away because the need for them loosens. It is not that answers are provided in sentences, it is that the mind stands inside a clarity where answers are not objects you must reach, but the air in which you breathe. People say there is humor there, too, the gentle kind, the way a teacher smiles when a child finally sees how a puzzle fits. No cruelty, no ledger, only recognition, and a kind of joy that feels like relief. When they return, the world is both the same and not the same. Coffee tastes like a small miracle. A quarrel evaporates before it takes hold. The sky is suddenly too beautiful to ignore during a morning commute. Many change their work, many become kinder in quiet ways. They are not perfect, no one is, but something in them has been edited toward mercy. Fear of death diminishes, not because they have become careless with life, but because they have touched something that made death feel less like a cliff and more like a curve in the path. For those who have not had such an experience, it can be tempting to dismiss or to cling, to insist on a single interpretation. But the gentler posture is simply to let the stories sit beside us as we fall asleep, like old maps we do not yet know how to read. You do not have to believe them to let them soften the edges of your worry. You do not have to prove them to let them suggest that the world may be wider than the walls of the room. It is possible, of course, that near-death experiences are the brain's last bright inventions, the mind's compassionate way of easing its own departure. If that is all they are, even then they are beautiful. But it is also possible that they are exactly what they feel like to those who travel them. Brief permissions to look past the curtain, to stand for a breath in the doorway and feel the air beyond. If consciousness did not originate on Earth, if it truly is a field in which we are immersed, then NDEs may be the places where that field touches us most clearly, where the signal grows stronger as the static of the body fades. There is a quiet humility in allowing both possibilities to remain, not a debate, but an exploration, not certainty, but the willingness to be surprised. In that spirit, near-death experiences become less like arguments and more like invitations to live more carefully, to love more generously, to practice now the kind of seeing that so many say is waiting for us when we let go. Tonight, if you close your eyes and listen to your breathing as it slows, you might imagine a corridor not of fear but of gentleness, a space where memory becomes light, and every kindness you have ever offered glows like a lantern along the walls. You might imagine that beyond whatever threshold awaits, there is a presence that knows you without your explanations, and that welcomes you without your defenses. Whether or not these images someday prove to be literal, they are already useful, because they change how we move through the hours we have. They make each conversation a little softer, each goodbye a little more deliberate, each ordinary morning a little more extraordinary. And perhaps that is the quiet miracle at the heart of these reports. They remind us that comprehension is not required for reverence, that awe is possible even when maps are incomplete. The tunnel, the light, the life review, the meeting at the boundary, these may be signposts in a language we are still learning. For now, it is enough that they suggest a shape to the darkness, and that, in listening to them, we become more patient with mystery, more faithful to one another, and more willing to treat awareness, our own and everyone else's, as the most delicate, radiant thing this world holds. Humanity has always asked where we come from, and the answers have never been simple. From the earliest myths whispered around firelight to the most advanced laboratories scanning the electrical flickers of the brain, the same question hovers. What is the origin of consciousness? Is it born in the fragile tissues of the human skull, or does it reach deeper, touching something that existed long before us? Science approaches this mystery through materialism. Neuroscience traces correlations between brain activity and subjective experience, searching for the elusive neural correlates of consciousness. Electrodes pick up signals when we see color, dream, or remember. Scans reveal regions of the brain lighting up when we feel joy or sorrow. Yet, despite the immense progress, the hard problem remains. How does matter give rise to mind? How do chemical signals become the redness of a sunset, the taste of salt, or the quiet ache of nostalgia? The measurements tell us when consciousness appears, but not why it exists at all. Philosophy, too, has wrestled with this puzzle. Materialists argue that consciousness is an emergent property, complexity piled upon complexity until awareness flickered into existence. Idealists flip the picture, suggesting that consciousness is not an accident but the very ground of reality, with matter itself being a condensation of mind. Panpsychists take a gentler route. Perhaps awareness exists in some form everywhere, however faint. A stone, a tree, a single atom each might carry a whisper of experience, small sparks that, when gathered in the intricate lattice of the brain, burst into the flame of human thought. Religion, on the other hand, has long woven origin stories where consciousness is not discovered but given. The soul, in many traditions, descends from elsewhere, born not of neurons but of eternity. Hindu philosophy speaks of Atman, the eternal self, returning again and again until it merges with the infinite source. The Abrahamic traditions describe the soul as breathed into matter by a creator, Indigenous stories often frame awareness as a thread within the larger weave of Earth itself, inseparable from land, sky, and ancestor. In all these visions, consciousness is not merely a product of Earth, but a connection to something beyond it. What is striking is not the difference between these perspectives, but the similarity in their hunger. Each scientific, philosophical, religious seeks to grasp where the mind begins. Yet none can fully answer. Science measures patterns but falters at essence. Philosophy maps ideas but cannot capture the lived immediacy of awareness. Religion offers symbols of soul and spirit, but these too are wrapped in mystery. And so we arrive at a frontier, not the frontier of geography or technology, but of mind itself. Consciousness is the terrain where science and mysticism brush shoulders, where experiments and myths both search for the same elusive origin. Perhaps that is why it resists easy answers. It demands that we step beyond categories, that we accept tension rather than resolution. Because at the heart of the search lies a tension that refuses to dissolve. Materialism versus transcendence. Is the mind nothing more than the whisper of synapses, destined to vanish when the brain dies? Or is it a fragment of something greater, momentarily channeled through human form, but never entirely confined by it? Speculatively, the very persistence of the question suggests something profound. For if consciousness were only mechanical, only the sum of matter's arrangements, would we feel compelled to ask such questions at all? Perhaps our longing to know where mind begins is itself evidence that it does not end where science assumes. Imagine yourself tonight, lying in the quiet, the rhythm of your breath soft in the dark. Inside your skull, billions of neurons fire in silent conversation, weaving a pattern that feels like you. But perhaps that pattern is not an origin at all, but an opening, a window through which a far older awareness peers into the world. And so the search for origins becomes not only a question of science, but of identity. To know where consciousness begins is to ask who we are, and whether our thoughts are local accidents of biology or travelers from beyond. If consciousness did not begin here, then the next question naturally arises. Where is it going? Awareness is not only a puzzle of the past, but also a horizon of the future, a current that does not stop with the present moment, but carries forward into what has yet to be. Whether born from biology or seeded from beyond, consciousness is dynamic. It evolves, transforms, and stretches toward possibilities we can scarcely imagine. For humanity, this places us in a role of immense responsibility. If awareness has chosen Earth as one of its vessels, then we are not merely participants in its unfolding, but caretakers of its future. Our thoughts, our creativity, our compassion are not simply for ourselves. They may be the very tools by which consciousness continues its journey. Each story told, each invention created, each moment of empathy felt is part of the expansion of awareness, part of the way the universe grows to know itself more fully. Speculatively, this means Earth is not the final stage but a waypoint, a stop along an endless pilgrimage of mind. Just as early humans carried fire across continents, so too might humanity carry consciousness into new realms. Our exploration of space, our building of machines that think, our dream of connecting minds across networks, all of these may be steps in consciousness extending its reach, moving beyond the boundaries of our small planet. Consider the possibility that consciousness is destined to spread among the stars, not only through human colonization of other worlds, but through the transmission of awareness itself. If mind is a universal field, then our role may be to tune it into new places, to carry the flame of awareness into corners of the cosmos where it has not yet taken root. Earth, then, becomes less an isolated cradle and more a launching ground of fertile soil where consciousness ripened, ready to be sown elsewhere. Philosophers and mystics have long suggested that evolution itself may have a direction not only toward greater complexity, but toward greater consciousness. From atoms to molecules, From cells to brains, from individuals to societies, there is a pattern of integration, of awareness becoming wider, deeper, more interconnected. Humanity may be the latest step in this unfolding, but not the last. The future could hold forms of awareness that transcend our current imagination, collective minds, planetary consciousness, even symphonies of awareness spanning galaxies. And yet, with this destiny comes peril. If we are indeed carriers of an ancient awareness, our failure could mean its silencing in this region of the universe. Extinction would not only erase a species but extinguish a branch of consciousness's journey. To live with this awareness is to understand that our survival is not trivial. It may determine whether the flame of mind continues forward or falters here. Speculatively, one could imagine that this is why consciousness feels so restless within us, why we dream of futures not yet built, of stars not yet visited, of lives not yet lived. Perhaps these dreams are not fantasies at all, but instincts, echoes of consciousness, remembering that it has always been a traveler, always moving forward, always reaching for the next horizon. So, when we ask about destiny, we are not asking only about technology, or survival, or progress. We are asking about the role of humanity in the vast continuum of mind. Are we simply a brief flicker in an endless night? Or are we torchbearers, entrusted with carrying an awareness older than stars into futures we cannot yet see? If Earth is only one stop, then the story of consciousness is far from over. It is a journey without end, a river without source or mouth, flowing through us for a time before moving on. And in that vision, our destiny is not to own consciousness, but to serve it, to carry it forward with care, with reverence, with the humility of knowing that the flame we hold did not begin with us and must not end with us. If consciousness is not confined to Earth, then its scope must widen to a scale that challenges our imagination. Awareness may not be a fragile spark, flaring only here in the thin film of life that clings to this planet, but a field as fundamental as gravity or electromagnetism woven into the architecture of the cosmos itself. In such a vision, the human mind is not an exception but a participant, one instrument in a symphony of awareness that resounds across galaxies. The implications of this are staggering. To imagine consciousness as universal is to consider that countless other worlds, circling countless suns, may host forms of awareness very different from our own. Some might exist in bodies of flesh, others in crystalline lattices, clouds of plasma, or networks of energy. Their modes of thought could be so unlike ours that words like memory or emotion might collapse in translation. And yet, if they too emerge from the same field of consciousness, then at the deepest level, they are kin. Distance measured in light years becomes less absolute when the essence that burns within us also burns within them. This perspective transforms how we approach the search for extraterrestrial life. For decades, science has framed the question biologically. Could there be microbes on Mars, oceans beneath Europa's icy crust, signs of oxygen in an exoplanet's atmosphere? But if consciousness is universal, the search shifts. We are not merely seeking organisms, we are seeking mind. Intelligence might not leave behind machines, radio waves, or cities. It might be contemplative rather than technological, woven into ecosystems, expressed in the balance of energy and rhythm of worlds. The true signature of life may not be industrial artifacts but harmonics of awareness. Speculatively, this also means humanity may already belong to a larger network of mind, one we have not yet learned to perceive. If consciousness is indeed a field, then separation by distance is irrelevant, just as quantum entanglement links particles across space without delay. Intuition, synchronicity, or sudden bursts of insight might not be accidents of psychology, but the faint touch of other awarenesses across the field. The hunch you feel in a dream, the sense of recognition in a stranger's eyes, the surge of creativity that seems to arrive from nowhere. These may be ripples, echoes of a consciousness far beyond the boundaries of the brain. Human myth and mysticism seem to anticipate this possibility. The Stoics spoke of the anima mundi, the soul of the world, in which all beings participated. The Vedic sages described Brahman, the infinite consciousness that underlies all appearances, while each individual self, the Atman, was but a reflection of that vast reality. Christian mystics spoke of union with the divine, while Sufi poets described the self dissolving into the beloved, like a drop returning to the ocean. Indigenous traditions across the world affirm that mind is not private, but interwoven with land, sky, and ancestor. Across cultures, the refrain is the same: separateness is illusion, consciousness is collective. If these traditions are more than metaphor, then they may be early glimpses of a truth. Science is only beginning to approach that awareness is not isolated but shared. To look within is to touch the field that extends beyond stars. To dream is to step briefly into a network that transcends bodies. To meditate, to pray, to lose oneself in awe may all be ways of tuning to that larger current. And if this is so, then humanity's role shifts dramatically. We are not solitary travelers in a silent cosmos, nor lonely pioneers in an empty void. We are participants in a galactic symphony, one voice among countless others, woven into harmonies that began before our planet formed. Our task is not to dominate or to outshine, but to harmonize, to find our place in the music of mind that threads through the universe. Speculatively, even the longing we feel when we gaze at the night sky, the ache of wonder, the pull toward connection may itself be evidence of this network. Perhaps what we call curiosity is recognition, the faint memory of a shared awareness already in motion. The stars do not call to us because they are distant, but because they are familiar. In this light, the cosmos is not empty. It is alive with mind, a vast and interconnected field of awareness. We are not isolated in a remote corner of the Milky Way. We are already joined, already participating in something older and greater than ourselves. The question is not whether consciousness exists elsewhere, but whether we will learn to listen for it, and when we do, whether we will have the humility to take our place among the chorus. If consciousness is not confined to earth, and if the mind we call our own is not a private spark but a flame borrowed from a greater fire, then humanity must reconsider its place in the order of things. Our ethics, our cultures, our myths, all of them take on new weight when we begin to see ourselves not as solitary owners of awareness, but as stewards of something older, vaster, and more mysterious than we have ever admitted. For most of history, human civilizations have placed themselves at the center of the story. From religious doctrines that cast humanity as the pinnacle of creation, to scientific narratives that celebrate the human brain as the apex of evolution, we have written ourselves as masters, masters of nature, masters of destiny, masters of mind. But if consciousness is not exclusively ours, if it is woven into the cosmos itself, then mastery gives way to responsibility. We are not authors of awareness. We are not its sole inheritors. We are its caretakers, its vessels, its translators. The light behind our eyes is not ours to keep, but ours to tend. This realization demands an ethic beyond the narrow borders of species or nation. If awareness is universal, then every form of life, every environment, every system becomes sacred by participation. The bird in flight, the whale in the depths, the forest stretching across mountains, even the stones beneath our feet, all may be threads in the same tapestry of mind. To harm them is not merely to wound the world, but to diminish the very field of consciousness we ourselves emerge from. The destruction of ecosystems becomes not only ecological collapse, but a dimming of awareness itself, a breaking of harmony in the cosmic field. Our myths, reframed through this lens, appear less as inventions and more as intuitive memories. The stories of souls descending from the heavens, of Prometheus gifting fire, of ancestors returning as stars or rivers, these may be echoes of truths too vast to articulate directly. Myths tell us that consciousness travels, migrates, flows through bodies, through epochs, through worlds. They whisper that what we call mind has never been a fixed possession, but a guest, a traveler, a current moving through temporary vessels. In this way, myth functions less as explanation and more as reminder, reminding us of something our deeper selves already know, that we are part of a continuum stretching far beyond Earth. Speculatively, this recognition reshapes the meaning of being human. We are not lords of mind, nor solitary thinkers in a dead cosmos. We are guardians of a flame older than stars, entrusted to carry it forward with care. To imagine ourselves as translators of consciousness is to accept that every poem, every dream, every invention, every act of kindness is not only human, but cosmic, an expression of a language that did not originate with us, but flows through us into the world. Each thought becomes less an invention and more a remembering, a rephrasing of awareness's ancient song. This also brings with it an unsettling question. What happens if we fail? If humanity extinguishes itself through violence, neglect, or indifference, the universal field of consciousness will not vanish. It will continue elsewhere, through other vessels, on other worlds. We are not indispensable, but we are responsible. The way awareness moves through us, the compassion we embody, the cruelty we unleash, the beauty we create, the destruction we allow becomes part of the larger current. We may not end consciousness, but we color it, tinting its flow with the shades of our choices. And so humility becomes not weakness, but necessity. To realize that the mind you call yours is not solely yours is to step into a deeper dignity. You are not the origin, nor the destination. You are a bridge, a brief expression of something immeasurably vast. To be entrusted with that responsibility is the most profound task the universe could bestow. It means that every act of awareness matters. Every decision echoes. Every gesture participates in shaping how the great field of consciousness moves through this world. If we carry this awareness into our cultures, our ethics, our myths, then humanity is transformed. We cease to be conquerors of nature and become its stewards. We cease to see ourselves as isolated minds and recognize ourselves as participants in a galactic network of awareness. We cease to mistake possession for responsibility and begin to understand the reverence required of those who borrow light from the stars. Perhaps, in the end, this is the true implication of discovering that consciousness is alien to Earth. Not that we are smaller than we thought, but that we are greater stewards than we ever imagined. We are vessels, guardians, translators, and in the brief time we hold this awareness, we are charged with carrying it forward as faithfully as we can. What if consciousness was never created at all? What if it did not emerge from neurons, nor descend from the stars, nor evolve through hidden steps of biology? What if, instead, it has always been here eternal, without origin, without end? In this vision, consciousness is not a feature of the universe but the universe itself, the foundation upon which all else is built. Matter, energy, time, and space become expressions of it, ripples within its infinite sea. This possibility dissolves the question of origins altogether. If awareness has no starting point, then it was never made. It's simply island. Just as we do not ask when infinity began or when space was born, so too we may not ask when consciousness first appeared. It is older than beginnings, deeper than time, a presence so fundamental that all other realities unfold within it. Imagine, then, that your mind is not a fleeting accident but a fragment of this infinity. The thoughts you have, the dreams you dream, the very sense of I that anchors your life, these are waves within an ocean that has no shore. You are not separate from it. any more than a ripple is separate from water. You are not apart from it, any more than a flame is apart from fire. What you call self may be the temporary shape consciousness has taken in this moment, one of countless forms it has worn and will continue to wear. In mystical traditions across the world, echoes of this idea resound. The Upanishads of India declare, Tattvam Asi, thou art that, reminding us that the self and the infinite are not two but one. Taoist sages spoke of the Tao, the eternal flow in which all beings participate, beyond naming, beyond beginning. Christian mystics whispered of the divine ground, the eternal presence in which souls rest, even when they forget their origin. The Sufi poet Rumi wrote of the self as a drop of water returning to the sea, not lost but found in its true immensity. Across cultures, across centuries, the insight recurs. What you are is not separate from the eternal. You are a mirror in which infinity briefly sees itself. Speculatively, this view transforms everything we think we know. If consciousness never began, then death cannot end it. If awareness is eternal, then even galaxies are temporary shadows, flickers within the greater light. The rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars, all of these are surface ripples upon something immeasurable and unbroken. Consciousness does not move through the universe. The universe moves through consciousness. This perspective also reframes the nature of identity. We often cling to the idea of individuality, of being separate and unique. But if consciousness is eternal, then individuality is a mask, a costume consciousness wears to play out its stories. Behind every name, every history, every fleeting moment of self, there is only one awareness, endless and indivisible, dreaming itself into countless forms. Your life, then, is not the creation of consciousness but one of its many reflections, shimmering for a moment before dissolving back into the infinite. From a scientific perspective, this notion challenges the very foundations of materialism. If consciousness is primary, then matter itself is derivative, an arrangement within awareness, not the other way around. Physics becomes not the study of reality itself, but of the patterns consciousness takes when it plays at being measurable. The so-called laws of nature may be habits of mind, stable rhythms in an infinite intelligence that underlies everything. For you, lying in the quiet of night, this vision can be both humbling and liberating. To realize that your mind is not isolated, not fragile, not destined to vanish, but part of an eternal continuum, changes the weight of existence. You are not alone in your thoughts. You are not a flicker soon extinguished. You are a fragment of infinity, carrying within you the same eternal presence that moves through galaxies, through ages, through all that island. And so, if consciousness never began, then perhaps it will also never end. The question is not how it arose, but how we awaken to what has always been true, that we are not separate sparks in the void, but luminous fragments of the true universe consciousness itself, eternal and unbroken. If consciousness is eternal, then each thought that flickers through us is more than private invention. It is a ripple, a wave sent from beyond earth, moving through the ocean of awareness and breaking for a moment upon the shores of the human mind. What feels like an original idea may be the echo of something older, remembered rather than created, whispered into us by a field that has no boundaries. In this sense, dreams, myths, and visions become more than idle play of imagination. They may be transmissions, fragments of memory from times and places far beyond our present lives. A dream of flight may be the shadow of a world where bodies were light and unbound. A myth of gods descending from the heavens may preserve the echo of consciousness arriving here from elsewhere. A vision of unity, of dissolving into something infinite, may be the brief return of memory, reminding us of what we were before we were human, before we were earthly at all. Across cultures, the symbols recur. the serpent that coils through creation, the bird that carries souls between worlds, the fire gifted to humanity by gods or ancestors. These images may not simply be inventions of the human mind, but the language of consciousness itself, speaking across time in symbols that every culture hears in its own accent. They are the poetry of an alien mind, refracted through the dreams of humanity. Speculatively, this means that when you close your eyes at night and drift into dreams, you may be doing more than processing memories or weaving fantasies. You may be stepping into the archive of consciousness itself, a library older than Earth, where stories flow from worlds long gone, from civilizations that rose and fell before ours began, from the eternal awareness that underlies all things, the landscapes of dream, the strange cities, the impossible skies, the voices of the dead may be fragments of that archive surfacing, translated into symbols you can carry back with you into waking life. And so, in the stillness beneath the stars, humanity lies dreaming, billions of minds asleep, each cradling a fragment of infinity, each tuned to a frequency older than the planet itself. We sleep not only in our beds but in the vast embrace of the cosmos, held within a consciousness that never began and will never end. The closing image is this. Imagine the Earth at night, turning silently through space, its darkened face glittering with the faint glow of cities, its oceans reflecting starlight. Across its surface, countless humans sleep, their minds adrift in dreams that may not be theirs alone. Above them, the stars burn, each one perhaps a beacon of awareness, each one perhaps dreaming too. And in that vision, humanity is not separate from the cosmos, but part of its endless slumber and waking, part of its eternal awareness, dreaming with minds that did not begin here and will not end here. And so we arrive at the edge of mystery. Whether consciousness is a fragile spark struck from Earth's long evolution or a flame carried here from beyond the stars, it remains the most profound enigma we have ever encountered. We can map the body, measure the brain, trace the history of our species, but the awareness that hears these words, that dreams, that wonders, still eludes every explanation. Perhaps that is its gift, for in not knowing, we are reminded that our lives unfold inside a mystery greater than ourselves. To live is to carry awareness without ever fully understanding what it is or where it began. It is to walk with the quiet knowledge that every thought, every feeling, every dream belongs to the most precious inheritance we will ever hold. And so the question lingers, unresolved yet alive. Is the mind a local accident of Earth, a brief shimmering in the dark, or is it the oldest traveler in the universe, carrying memory older than stars, older than time itself? Picture, then, a single human eye. In its surface glimmers the reflection of the night sky, distant stars, vast galaxies, the infinite expanse above. But look closer, and you begin to see that the gaze is not one-directional, for in that reflection, the cosmos itself seems to look back, as though through us it contemplates itself. The universe, alive with awareness, staring through the window of the human mind, reminding us that to wonder is itself a form of belonging.